Step up. You saw that, right? Step back down. Do it again. Okay, go back down. Now I'm going to tell you to stop.
Okay.
If you can't see. Stop. No, a little go further. Stop. Okay? And you'll go back down now for a moment. Now, rest, stand, sit, something. What I'm going to ask you is first, what is the direction of movement at the hip and the knee? We won't do the ankle because you haven't added it yet. What is the direction of movement? What's happening at each joint? Okay? So just come back to that position again. You want your foot up. Up a little further. Up a little. Okay. What is happening? I tell you what, turn around and let them see from that side now. What is happening at her right? Come down because I don't want you to fall. What's happening at that point at her right hip?
Extension.
It's extension of the femur at the hip. What else is happening?
Extension of the knee.
No, at the hip.
Extension. Okay.
Turn your stool sideways and step up. And it doesn't matter which.
You mean
Face them, yeah.
Oh.
What else is, come up just a little higher. What else is happening at her hip?
Pelvis is anteriorly rotating.
A little bit, but I'm more worried about something else. What is gravity trying to do? See, when she's coming up, you said her hip is extending. That means gravity is trying to flex. What is gravity doing also at this hip?
Trying to have the right hip?
Yeah. Isn't it trying, I don't want to knock you over, isn't it trying to pull her pelvis down like this? So what else is happening? There is certainly a moment to adduct, so she must be abducting the pelvis at the hip joint. Does everybody see that? Because this is so important. Okay.
So
This
Come
motion,
back up. Now, if gravity has, well, let's just have you step off of there now. We don't even need you up there. When she picks the left foot up, gravity is over here trying to pull her pelvis. It's trying to adduct her pelvis at her hip. If she doesn't want to go down, she's got to abduct. Now, then the knee isn't so bad. What's the knee doing?
Wobbling?
Yeah. When she steps up, what's the knee doing on this side? Extending of the probably femur at the knee. Okay, sit down, go sit down, and we'll have you back up. So everybody got that in your mind? What's happening? Okay. If she is extending her something, femur or pelvis, in this case probably femur at the hip, what muscle or muscles must be working? Gluteus maximus. How about the hamstrings? Going. But not just. How about the hamstrings? They're hip extensors, right? But what else are they? Knee flexors. Do I want to have something flexing my knee? So that's going to be primarily a gluteus maximus function. Right? Because I don't really want the hamstrings in there, because if that's true, then I got to work the knee extensors more.
So the hamstrings are in active insufficiency?
They're not in anything. They're relaxed.
So what's the difference in being relaxed and then being in active insufficiency?
In active insufficiency, they're as short as they can go. These aren't short.
Right.
They're just not being used very much, if at all. Okay.
So
So we're talking about rotation of the hip right now, or are we talking about the movement of the knee? Or are we
We're at
talking
the
about
hip.
All being.
I'm at the hip right now. But I have to consider what's happening at the knee, because if I want the knee extending, I better not be using much of the hamstrings because they're powerful. I mean, they aren't primarily hip extensors, are they? They're primarily
Knee flexors.
knee flexors. Okay? Now, her pelvis was being pulled into adduction of the pelvis at the femur on the right, correct? Yeah.
I always think of adduction and abduction as moving away or towards the midline of the body. So how can you adduct or abduct a hip or a pelvis?
Okay, well, let me ask you something. What happens when you adduct?
Away.
You bring it
The
towards.
femur gets closer to the pelvis, doesn't it? So if the pelvis is moving toward the femur, that's got to be adduction also. I mean, you don't have any choice here. So sometimes our definitions don't work very well. In this case, it's the angles getting more acute in adduction. Okay? Now, if the pelvis is trying to come toward the femur, what muscle must be contracting? Well, the hip is adducting by gravity, so what must you be using? Huh? Abductors, which is primarily what? Gluteus medius is the hip abductor. Remember the Mae West walk. I can't do that so very well anymore because it hurts too much. But. Okay. So at the hip, I've got the gluteus maximus working, and I got the gluteus medius working. Now, what kind of contraction is the gluteus maximus doing? Is it getting shorter, getting longer, or staying the same length? Huh? It's getting shorter because her hip is...
Give me that.
No, I'll get you back in a minute. Her hip is extending, so the muscle is getting shorter, so it's what kind of contraction? Concentric. Now, the gluteus medius, what kind of contraction? And here, the answer is determined by what you saw. Now, sometimes what will happen when the person steps up is that the person will actually allow the pelvis to abduct a little bit. If the person allows the pelvis to abduct a little bit, what kind of, adduct rather, if the person allows the pelvis to adduct a little bit, what kind of contraction is it? Huh? Eccentric, be brave. If the person is holding the pelvis level,
It's not symmetric.
if the person is actually going to get that pelvis up a little higher to get the foot up there, then it is concentric. Questions about that? This is you're beginning to watch things and use the information. So if I want her to be able to step up on a step, I would need to use an exercise for the gluteus maximus that
Concentrically contracts.
that is using concentric contractions, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Do you skip the whole phase of the hip flexion to bring the foot up towards the step to begin with?
Oh, but that's what's happening on the other side at this time.
Okay.
Okay?
So
So I'm saying, what we're doing is she's going through this whole phase.
Okay. I was just thinking if she stays.
We're only taking a specific picture of a specific time.
Okay.
And I find there's two times that help the students the most. By the end of the program, you ought to be able to analyze the whole thing, but right now, for most of you, I've lost you somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I want you to think about it. This is how you think. Okay, what's happening at the knee? It was knee
Extension.
extension. What muscles are working? I'm going to take a 4th credit off on yours.
Glute max.
Do that stuff.
Why not the rectus?
Because the hip is extending and.
The hip is extending, and why would you want to bring in a hip flexor? So the vasti would be what would be working, and they would be working how? Concentrically. Okay?
Somebody gets it.
If you don't get it, it's okay. There's time. What I used to do after the first week, I would put up on the board, you are now 2.5% finished with the program. You're about 7.5% now at the end of this week. I don't know for sure. It used to be you had 42 weeks in some formal activity in the program. Okay, I don't know how long it is now. They keep changing things and they don't have to ask me anymore. I don't have to give my opinion either. Okay, come on back up now. Huh?
We'd love your opinion, though.
Not on the program you wouldn't, because what difference does it make?
In this class.
Well, I'm trying to give you my opinion. Okay, get your right foot up there. Now, bring the left one up. Okay, bring it up like you were really going to step up on it. Go back down. Okay, what was happening at this hip? Go back down. With that foot. Well, I'll put this foot up now. Step up. What's happening at this hip?
Flexion.
Flexion. What's happening at the knee?
Extension.
Huh?
First is flexion.
Flexion until she gets up there. So we're going to go back to where you were. Off, foot off. Come up. Right there. Okay? Just before her foot hits the floor. Okay, you can go sit down. Because they got a perfect picture of you. And I think you're tall. I remember one of my students back when I was a clinical instructor. I was on the floor and she came in and she was 6 foot tall. And I'm looking up thinking, this is who they sent me? I stand up. I'm still at pelvis level. Okay. Her left hip was flexing. Her left knee was flexing. What muscle was working at the left hip? Muscle or muscles? Probably the iliacus and psoas major. Probably not the sartorius because we don't want all those other movements, right? So it's going to be primarily iliopsoas. What kind of contraction?
Concentric.
Concentric. What's happening at the knee?
Flexion.
Flexion. What muscle or muscles? I'm going to take off 3/4 of your credit because the hamstrings as a whole do what? Huh?
Biceps more short.
The hamstrings as a whole do hip extension, so you only want the one joint knee flexor, which is the
Short-headed biceps.
short-headed biceps femoris, and it is going to be working how? Concentrically.
Would the gastroc be involved in that too?
Well, would you? Because what is her ankle doing? Dorsiflexing, and would you want the gastroc to be working when you're trying to dorsiflex? So if you're going to get, say, just one muscle, short head of the biceps. Now,
Once you plant the foot, though, you'd start using that gastroc isometrically to take that step.
actually, once you plant the foot, you might kick it in concentrically, but I wouldn't until I got my knee straight. I would use the soleus. because I'm still wanting, once I plant the foot, to be extending my knee. Once the foot's there, I want to lift up, so I got to extend my knee. Okay. It's